Hello everyone and welcome back to Dragalia Foundry, a fan channel where everything Dragalia Lost can be found. This video is all about the preview we got for the upcoming Gala Dragalia banner that will release tomorrow. This banner is really exciting in that it's our first Gala Dragalia where we're actually not just going to have the Gala unit, but also some newly added adventurers. A lot of people were torn, were debating, are we going to get a banner for this raid event, or are we going to get a Gala Dragalia at the end of this month? Particularly after the surprise of Gala Mars last month not being expected, nobody knew what the new pattern would be like for Gala characters. So, it turns out they kind of combined the best of both worlds, and we're getting a Gala banner that also features a bunch of new units. So we have to wait and see the exact numbers for this on the appearance rates. That's why I do want to be a little cautious, but it does seem like this could very well be the highest value Gala that we have ever had, and that's kind of saying a lot. It's coming off of Gala Mars, who himself was a Gala Dragon, meaning he had a 0.8% chance base appearance rate. So this Gala looks pretty good, pretty exciting to me. I will likely summon at least a little bit on this. That being said, this does last until June 3rd, so as with all banners, you can always wait toward the end of the banner if you want to get a sneak peek of what's coming next. I do think there are some very real possibilities for tempting banners down the road here. We are in June. That tends to mean that there is a wedding banner. We got one last year. We may get one this year with brides or grooms. Those were part of the permanent pool last year, but I don't think that necessarily means they will be this year. For example, last year, the Valentine's adventurers all eventually got added to the permanent pool, but the new Valentine's characters from this year were not added immediately to that pool, so perhaps the brides and grooms will take a similar route, where this time around, it does seem like they've been pushing monetization more. Thankfully, they've dialed back a little bit on the Part 1 and Part 2 banners, but they might make up for that with having more limited time banners, like the wedding banner. The other thing that will happen, more likely in July and August though, with Dragalia's precedent, is some type of summer banners. Last year there were 2 different ones. Again, those were part of the permanent pool last year, but I don't think that's necessarily a guarantee to happen this year. So if those are appealing to you in any way, that's a slight consideration. And the final thing I'll just mention is last year around this time, we actually got a rerun of Ieyasu's banner, the Eastern Emissaries banner, that had come out around New Year, and was the New Year's banner of that year. So I think we might get a rerun of Mitsuhide's banner this year, the Clawful Caper banner, or whatever it may be named. I think that might come back. It's the middle of the year, those units are pretty desirable. They're also light units, so it kind of makes sense to run them during this raid where we're fighting a shadow boss. So I think there's a strong possibility that we'll get that next after the Gala. So just be aware, and again, if you aren't sure, you can always wait until that last day of summoning and try make a more informed decision. Having said that, here is why I'm excited about this Gala, besides Galah Leif, which I know is a huge fan favorite for folks. The newly added 5-star adventurers Radiant, Xuan Zang, Light, and Zhu Bajie, Light, and the 4-star adventurer Sha Wujing, Light, and 5-star dragon Tie Shan Gong Zhu will also appear in the next summon showcase. So I'm not sure with the wording here, next summon showcase. Do they mean that these adventurers will appear in the showcase after the Gala? The way that I read this is that they will be on the Gala. What I'm not sure of is, will they have a raid up on the Gala? They might just be part of the random chance summoning pool on the Gala, and then maybe after the Gala, they'll actually have like their own proper banner where they're also a focus. So I'm not sure about that. That's one to really check for and look for before you make a hasty decision. Remember, you can go here to the appearance rates. You can see next to anything that has an appearance rate up, a summon rate up icon. And on the showcase info, anything that's featured should also be described here, including 4 stars. So if you want to know more about Sha Wujing, you'll be able to see that there if he is on raid up. Alright, so that's enough preamble about the Gala itself. I think it's a great time to summon if you're new to the game. You can pick up a lot of new characters at once. The base appearance rate for 5 stars is higher. Having said that, if you've been playing for a while, you have a pretty full collection, and I find myself in this position. The Galas, I think, get better the more that you skip in a row, and the fewer recent adventures you've summoned. So, like, I might not go too hard on this Gala, and just kind of bank up my Wormite collection so that maybe around the anniversary Gala, there will be a large plethora of new things that I haven't gotten, and then I can cash in all my Wormites and have a slightly better chance of getting new things as opposed to getting Eldwater. If you just want Eldwater, there's also better ways to spend your Wormite, if you have time. Things like playing the raid event and clearing out the Blazon summons, it's very time consuming, but that actually can be much more productive for Eldwater farming than just summoning is. A lot of people are kind of in the middle where they want to give themselves a chance to get new units, but they also don't mind Eldwater picked up along the way. But if you're interested in some of those more hardcore farming strats, I will post a link in the pinned comment to a really helpful resource by Iatea, Taya, who did this like 1,000 times in Celiera's raid and has a lot of data on how Eldwater farming is more efficient done by playing the game as opposed to summoning. But in any case, let's look at the adventurers who are featured here as well as the 5-star dragon. Unfortunately, we don't have any detail on Sha Wujing, and that's actually the one I want to summon the most, with it being the 4-star. So we will get to talk about the 5 stars in this video, give initial impressions. 2 things to keep in mind. Remember, we don't know the SP cost of skills. In other words, we don't know how quickly they charge up. The other thing is we don't know the damage modifiers on the skills, so we don't really know how much damage they're going to deal. That's the weakness with these previews, is that type of information usually isn't available. Sometimes, in rare cases, it might have been data mined, but it's usually not available. You're usually just going off of what you see here, the text and so on. So bear that in mind, that we can speculate about certain things, but that may be a pretty big determinant of how good these adventurers actually are. So let's start with Galah Leif. I'm really shocked to see the pose, although this pose has been known for a while, but still it's kind of that broke back pose, so to speak, with him turning his spine in an incredible way. It actually highlights how absurd this pose is to see it on a character like Leif, in particular male character, where you don't see this very often. So I kind of respect them for doing that. At the same time, I hope we get a free Leif as our Chapter 14 story character, because I actually like his regular portrait also. But Leif says, "By the honor of the White Sparrows, I shall cut a way forward for his majesty." And he is a wind sword, which kind of surprised me. I really put him on light as an adventurer, but it's sometimes the case, I guess. Well, you know, now that I think about it, most of the Galas, they do sort of reflect their original character as far as their elemental alignment. The one exception is probably Gala Yuden, who you could argue has a light component to him, even though he starts off flame. So it is interesting to me that he's wind here. He's a defense unit, and he has a lot of HP. He has the same skill share cap on his points of 10, so he can borrow up to 10 points worth of skills from other adventurers if you've unlocked those. He's the captain of Elberia's Royal Guard and exemplar of the Knights. His love for his country is exceptionally strong. A brilliant swordsman, he also served as an instructor in the way of the blade to the royal children. And his first skill is Feathered Gale. Deals wind damage to surrounding enemies and reduces their defense by 5% for 20 seconds. That 20 seconds is long. Not a lot of debuffs last this long. A lot of them are in the 10 or 15 second range, so I appreciate that. This defense reduction will not stack. I do wonder here, and I think that would refer to him using it multiple times. I think if you have multiple Galah Leif, you could probably stack it with your friend's Galah Leifs. If this skill is used during Shielding Stance, okay, so he has a stance, a variant called Sparrow's Protection will be used instead. Sparrow's Protection increases the user's defense by 60%, which is a lot, for 15 seconds. So, I don't know what the name of his normal stance is going to be, but he has at least one alternate stance, which is Shielding Stance. So maybe it's like Striking Stance and Shielding Stance, something like that. Might sound kind of cool. And obviously in the Shielding Stance, at least for this first skill, he has a much more defensive effect, which it's kind of like bringing the Agnita weapons to the scale of a character The Agito weapons also toggle between two different skills, usually one more defensive in nature and one more offensive. I kind of like this, and also it feels like, at least to me, if I were using Leif in battle, I think that this might be kind of mind-melting to use because you have to track which stance you're in. Even though there's only two, swords charge skills very quickly typically, so swapping back and forth between these accurately is going to require a little bit of intensity, I feel. That being said, it does to me capture the idea of a really strong captain, a trained combatant, to be switching between offense and defense. So from a flavor standpoint, I like that this is something that Leif does. And I like that there's a defensive aspect of his kit with him being a defense type unit, which, if you're not aware, those labels, they really just refer to the stat spreads on the character, and even then it's not a huge difference. But also just with him being kind of a protector in the story, I think that that's actually pretty cool. His next skill is Pinion Slash, deals wind damage to enemies in a line and reduces their strength by 5% for 20 seconds. Nice, so strength down fits with his defensive nature, and it also lasts a while. It also does not stack. Poison foes take extra damage. So far we haven't seen any way to cause poison yet. If this skill is used during shielding stance, a variant called Parrying Slash will be used instead. Parrying Slash deals wind damage to enemies directly ahead and inflicts poison, so there we go, that's how you do poison. Damage is increased against foes with reduced defense. Very, very interesting here. So let's look at his co-ability and chain co-ability, and then I'll talk about how he might feel to play. So his co-ability is unique, reduced strength and defense Punisher plus 8%, increases damage to enemies with reduced defense or strength by 8%, benefits your whole team. This is pretty cool because it's unique. Having said that, this might be kind of hard to slot into your team. If you're leading Galah Leif, obviously you already have it, but just thinking about it, a lot of characters want a blade co-ability. That's a 10% damage increase, so it's higher than this. This also isn't always on, and also if you're relying on other types of punishers, this is going to be additive with those, so it's not always going to be a complete 8% damage increase. So I don't think it's super broken or good necessarily. I think it's probably on par with something like a skill damage co-ability, or maybe worse than that, or maybe like Mega Man's co-ability. But still, the fact that it's a new option, I like it, and Leif's chain co-ability is wind strength double buff. This is going to increase any wind character on your team's strength by 10% for 15 seconds whenever they receive a defense up buff, but after activating, it doesn't activate again for 15 seconds. And then, since the abilities are simple, let's just talk about them. White Sparrow's Vow 2, so reduces susceptibility to freeze and bog by 100%, so he has double resistances. Flurry Strength plus 20%, so more damage when you have combo up, and notably, there's still no combo time chain co-ability to my knowledge in the wind element. Debuff skill time plus 20%. This is new. We haven't seen this before, but we're going to see it again later. Increases the duration of bleeding and debuff skills that reduce strength and defense by 20%. Notably here, bleeding is coded as a debuff. It's not an affliction. It's in the debuff category. And that could be relevant with skill share. If you think about putting a bleed unit onto Leif here, because typically these debuff skill or buff skill time, the way that worked was it only applied to the user. So I have to presume here that with this being an ability and not a co-ability, it's only going to apply to Leif. So if you put a bleeding skill on him, like Ieyasu's, this could be very, very good. It could lead to a larger amount of bleed time, probably one additional tick, make it easier to maintain 3 stacks of bleed, considering the shared skills have such a high SP cost often. So I like this. I feel like this is also very, very cohesive, obviously with his Feathered Gale and Pinion Slash, and then with his co-ability as well. So now I'm going to talk about how it might feel to play Leif. Purely speculation here, but the way I think you might sequence this is you start by, let's start with Feathered Gale dealing damage and reducing defense, right? So you use that in your regular stance. You switch to parrying stance to use, you switch to shielding stance to use Parrying Slash. When you're in shielding stance and you use Parrying Slash, you're going to cause poison and you're going to do extra damage because you've already reduced the defense of the enemy. At that point, you switch back to well, I guess you could either do one of two things. You could switch back to your regular stance and use Pinion Slash again, where you'll now be dealing extra damage because the foe is poisoned, or you can stay in shielding stance and use Feathered Gale to get a defense buff and trigger your strength double buff. Basically, I think that this is going to require, it's going to feel sort of like juggling, right? Because you'll want to give yourself a defense buff at intervals where you're going to be able to activate your Chain Co ability. So I do think there's going to be times when you want to use the defense buff on Sparrow's protection. Otherwise, maybe if you just have some backliner or some other character on your team that randomly throws in defense buffs, that could also work. Or let's say you're using the Agito weapon. I mean, toggling it to get that small strength buff doesn't seem good because you lose the big strength buff. So actually, maybe you don't even want to play around strength double buff here. Maybe it's better to just do Feathered Gale and do Parrying Slash, and then keep doing Feathered Gale and sometimes do Pinion Slash if the poison is still active. But still, Sparrow's protection being an option I think could be good. It's such a large defense buff as well. Maybe you do want to use that if, like, let's say Feathered Gale doesn't have that much damage. It doesn't deal a lot of damage. The main purpose is just to put on one defense down stack onto the enemy. If that's the case, then perhaps during that 20 seconds, you don't mind throwing out a Sparrow's protection, getting a strength double buff off, because using Feathered Gale again, it's not going to do a lot of damage and it doesn't stack with itself. So I am very, very curious to see how Galah Leif plays, but I sort of have no doubt he's probably going to be pretty good. Looking at him, I don't think he's necessarily going to slot into the auto Ciela comps super easily. The nice thing about Ronzal has the Dispel Defense Co ability, so Ronzal has a lot going on for him. And the nice thing about Silas has Strength Down, HP Co ability. He can cleanse. Gosh, can he cleanse afflictions or debuffs? I'm not sure. Off the top of my head, I don't remember, and I don't have a Mana Spiraled Silas. But needless to say, he's solid in that comp. Your healer is probably somebody you want in that comp. And then Templar Hope, having the team healing double buff and a first skill that raises the defense of the entire team, is also quite good. So I don't know that this actually is needed for people in that situation. I see Galah Leif more as just another powerful wind option, so that perhaps you could see more variety in pubs for people who are challenging that in co-op. And maybe there's an off chance that he's tanky enough where you could share some skills onto him to where he could kind of take over that Templar Hope role. So I'm excited about him. I think that this is a pretty cool adventure. He obviously has his own aura, his own identity as a Gala character. Like, I liked how they're playing around in the debuff space here. I like that he has the shielding stance and his other stance. So I like Galah Leif. I think if there's only one knock I have against him, it might be the poison thing, because we've just seen that a lot at this point. I don't think that that's really necessary. Maybe they could have done something else, but that is the world that we live in with all these poison punishers and affliction meta. So I like Galah Leif. I think he's quite strong. He'd be a great pickup. Let's continue looking here, and now we're getting into the adventurers who, they're going to be here on the Gala by my reading of things. I don't know that they'll necessarily have an increased appearance rate or not, but I do think they're going to be here on the Gala, otherwise they wouldn't have kind of advertised it in such a splashy way. So the first one that we have is Radiant Xuan Zang, and she is the splendor of the legendary Shihei lights the path to destiny, or that's what she says. A Qilin sealer who uses the power of the relic Shihei to manipulate light. Her kindness drove her to break the sealer code and take an active role in the world at large. Her recent worry is her inability to let go of her pupil. She's a support unit, but once again, remember, this is mostly about the stat spread. Like, Gala Cleo is another example of a support unit who has plenty fine personal and team DPS. She also has this Scared Chill cap, like everybody else, of 10. And then her skills are Surging Light and Coalescent Light. So Surging Light deals light damage to enemies in a line, reduces their strength by 10% for 10 seconds, and inflicts paralysis. If this skill is used after the user's charge gauge, okay, unique mechanic once again, has filled, a variant called Bright Flash will be used instead. Bright Flash deals light damage to enemies in a line and reduces their strength by 25% for 10 seconds. Paralyzed foes take extra damage. Okay, let's go back to parse through what we just read. So you're dealing light damage in a line and lowering strength by 10% for 10 seconds, not that much, and inflicting paralysis. If your charge gauge has been filled, then you don't cause paralysis, but you get a much bigger strength reduction. Presumably you get a higher damage modifier, although that's not apparent here. And instead of causing paralysis, you deal paralysis killer or enhanced damage because the enemy has paralysis. Then we have Coalescent Light, partially fills the user's charge gauge, alright, and adds 20% to the user and nearby teammates' shadow resistance for 10 seconds. Nice. More defensive in nature, but Shadow Agito we pretty much know nothing about right now, to my knowledge at least, so this might come in handy in that fight. The shadow resistance increase will not stack. If this skill is used after the user's charge gauge has filled, a variant called Light Stream will be used instead. That one increases the strength of the user and nearby allies by 20% for 15 seconds, and you get 40% shadow res, and you inspire the entire team, which means their next skill attack is going to be a guaranteed critical hit. The shadow resistance increase will not stack. Alright, so her skills both do more things, have better effects when the charge gauge is full. Particularly the second skill having this 20% strength buff to the user and nearby allies for 15 seconds is pretty nice, considering that the res may or may not be relevant. And another thing to note here is that if your charge gauge is not full, this helps you fill it. Once it's full, obviously, it doesn't get that effect anymore. The inspiration is also nice, like unleashing this around break in a fight could be very, very strong. So let's read more to find out what the charge gauge actually does. Her co-ability is skill damage plus 15%, and then her chain co-ability gives some shadow res. Not a particularly strong chain co-ability and co-ability combination in my opinion, but then again, skill damage is just such a good regular co-ability that it's rare to see a strong chain co-ability paired with that. Going back to Leif for just a second, even though I don't think his co-ability is as strong as like Blade and Wand co-abilities, I do think the combination of a semi-offensive build around chain plus an offensive co-ability is pretty good. So if you have a character who can utilize both of these as your lead, then this is actually pretty nice. It's rare to see that degree of two offensive co-abilities or an offensive co-ability and chain paired together. Back to Xuan Zang here. Let's look at her abilities. So Shihei's Radiance 2 fills 100% of skill gauges at the start of quest and grants the user a charge gauge. So that's what grants her charge gauge. It's also just conveniently skill prep of 100%. The charge gauge fills when Coalescent Light is used, and the amount the charge gauge fills increases based on the number of team members in Coalescent Light's area of effect when it is used. When the gauge is completely filled, Surging Light, Coalescent Light, and the user's Force Strike will each be upgraded once. These upgrades will not stack and will be consumed on use. The upgraded Force Strike will lower foes' paralysis resistance. This resistance reduction effect will not stack. Whoa, so a lot to take in, a lot to process there. So it says they're upgraded. I'm going to assume for now that that just means you get the variant. You know, you get the Bright Flash variant or the Light Stream variant. I don't think it's some additional upgrade that's not mentioned there. So I think that that's what that refers to. Based on this, the only way to fill the charge gauge is to have your allies near you when you're using her second skill, Coalescent Light, and the amount you fill is going to be based on that. I wonder if having just all three allies near you is going to give you a full charge gauge, or if you maybe need to use it, say, twice with all three allies to actually fill it up. Depending on how frequently you can fill up the charge gauge, I think that that will affect how high the modifiers are on the alternate versions of these skills. If it's something that happens very infrequently, we could end up with really high modifiers like we saw in Crom, just because they know it's not going to happen that often. If it happens fairly often, and I'd be very curious about how this works in a raid, they do say number of team members, not number of allies here, so perhaps having other people's characters in your radius won't matter for this. But I think that they... Oh yeah, nearby teammates. This doesn't say nearby allies, so I don't think they would even... Well? Huh. The nearby allies get the strength buff, but not the shadow res, the way it's worded here. So in a raid, you could use the strength buff to power up all 16 characters, but the shadow res would only power up your 4 characters, just based on the wording and the precedent that we've had for that type of wording. The other thing that's not mentioned, though, is that I haven't talked about, is it's also going to give her an upgraded Force Strike, which can lower foes' paralysis resistance. This reduction in resistance will not stack, but this is super cool. We've seen this with Volk, with the Plague mechanic. We have yet to see this on adventures that we can actually play. But I love this because one of the weaknesses with this Affliction meta and worlds that we've moved into is you cap up and build up tolerances to resistances really fast on enemy bosses. If you're not aware of how this works, every time you afflict a boss, they build up a tolerance to that affliction, so you can't continuously spam it. Now for paralysis, it's not too harsh. Every time you paralyze the boss, they get an additional 5 percentage points on their resistance to paralysis. So if they started at 0, they're building up 5 each time that you afflict them, and eventually that'll build up to 100%. This means that you could actually maintain paralysis even once you get to that point, because by using this, you can lower their paralysis reduction. And what I really wonder is for enemies who are completely immune to paralysis, which admittedly are rare, but let's think of Roy Fafnir III, for instance, in Mercurial Gauntlet. He has an 80% paralysis res, which means you can barely get off 4 paralysis instances on him, which, you know, doesn't feel great if you're trying to do Shadow Mercurial Gauntlet with your light team. If this can reduce him below his 80%, that's kind of interesting, but even not counting that in, just being able to tick him down from 100 to 95 suddenly means that you can do another instance of paralysis, and it's pretty good. So I like this. I hope we see this more in the future. This is kind of neat, and I don't know if they'd be willing to put it on things like Bog or Stun, Sleep, and Freeze, because it might get too powerful. But for Poison and Burn and Frostbite, maybe we'll see this more in the future. And to me, it also fits with how Xuan Zang is a sealer. It feels like something that she would do, so I like the flavor as well. She has Poison Res, which we still don't have a lot of strong light adventures with Poison Res, so I like to see that. Could be relevant for the future Agito, since not many players are actually doing High Zodiarc's Trial anyway, which is where you want Curse Res. And then she has debuff skill time of 20%, which also, you know, when you look at both of these, well, the first one actually, the first one is what causes a strength debuff. The second one only gives buffs, so I guess it's really just that. You're getting slightly more time on the strength debuff. Maybe this isn't as good as I thought. Then again, like before, you could put a bleed inducing skill or like a strength reduction skill like Curran on her, although Curran does better when the enemy's poisoned, so I do wonder what type of adventurer skill you would want to share onto her. Actually, I think I might know one. Let's go ahead and switch to the next character. So, let's go. I'm going to honor my debt and see it repaid in full. I like that he's a 5-star because he is probably my favorite hanger-on of Xuan Zang, but I'm also sad that he's a 5-star because it means I might not be able to get him. But this is Zhu Bajie, and let's look at him. He's a light axe attack unit. Same amount of skill point cap as everybody. A military man and a former commander in Tai Wu's army, once arrogant, he reformed after being rebuked by Xuan Zang, and now travels with her uninvited. He's a devoted husband and often mentions his wife in glowing terms. I just want to see that adventure story to see what that's all about. But anyways, the skill I was alluding to with Xuan Zang that she might want to borrow is this one called Bursting Fury. Oh no, this doesn't do what I thought. Never mind, I take that back. I thought this was going to be kind of like Curran's skill, because this guy kind of reminds me of Curran with being a super sweet axe that I really want to summon. But anyway, it doesn't work as I would have anticipated. I thought for some reason it had a debuff, it does not. Still though, I do love that they labeled this as shareable, so it's very clear, it's very transparent what you're getting here. None of the other skills have been labeled shareable so far, so presumably this is the only one, and maybe the one on Sha Wujing will also be shareable. But Bursting Fury deals light damage to enemies directly ahead and inflicts stun. Nice, a source of stun, a shareable skill. It's not unheard of, you know, we have Annalie as well, who only costs 3 to share. But I still like to see it, and more importantly here, the lower the user's HP, the more damage the skill deals. So you could put this on other Crisis or Enmity characters. Also, this might just mean it has a really high damage modifier, because these types of skills that scale off of your low HP often just have really good damage mods. Then, Zhu Bajie has Macho Charge, makes the user unhealable for 10 seconds if the user's HP is below 30% of max HP when using this skill, increases the user's strength by 20% for 10 seconds. If the user's HP is above or equal to 30% of max, it reduces it down to 20% of max and grants them a one-use Divergent Shield that nullifies damage less than 80% of the user's max HP. Divergent shields can stack with ordinary shields. Alright, so there's quite a bit going on here. Making the user unhealable for 10 seconds is actually super nice. I know it sounds like a drawback, but honestly, playing these low HP characters in co-op settings, you'll often run with healers who unfortunately don't have that same respect for your low HP character that you might. They're probably going to just heal on cooldown or heal when other teammates that you're playing with need healing. So I actually don't see this as a drawback. I see this as a possible advantage. Obviously, ideally, if you're running him, you wouldn't want to run him in a healer comp to begin with, most likely. So I don't know. That may or may not be a good thing. Let's take it as a neutral thing. And then if the user's HP is below 30% of max when using it, increases their strength by 20% for 10 seconds. So probably a big enough strength buff that if you can use that before Bursting Fury, it's worth casting this. For some characters, I think Natalie fits into this category. A lot of times, once you use her second skill to get to this low HP, she has the same thing with this Divergent Shield falling to 28% HP off her second skill. But often when you use it once, you don't need to use it again because it's better for her. She gets so much damage off of her first skill that she just wants to only use that and focus on that. We'll see how that actually works out with Zhu Bajie. But his co-ability is defense, 15%. His chain co-ability gives him some shadow res when he's maintaining a combo, or when any light adventurers on your team are maintaining a combo, they'll get that as well. Okay, very defensive combination actually. Like a lot of defense co-ability characters can afford a offensive chain co-ability and usually get one, so I actually don't think this is necessarily a strong point here. But if we end up needing a lot of resistance defense in the future, it could be. Abilities are Rampaging Boar 2, grants the user a unique Force Strike that deals increased damage to paralyzed enemies, and has 3 increasingly powerful charge levels. In addition, they are immune to knockback while charging their Force Strike. Love this. This feels like it's going to be fun. I hope that this is implemented in a way where this is like a main part of his rotation and what he wants to be doing. I just think this is fun. Rampaging Boar, when I look at him, it makes perfect sense to me. Like, this feels like a huge flavor home run, and if it's anything like the normal Axe Force Strike, which hits such a wide area, I think it's just going to be awesome to do and to watch. Hopefully it's also powerful. The increased damage to paralyzed enemies, there's no way to paralyze here so far. So that would be something you'd need to rely on a teammate for, or you would need to share skills onto him that cause paralyze. He has Curse Res, not Poison Res, so I guess Julieta's still holding down the fort as far as Poison Res goes. And then Resilient Offense plus 10%, which I think is excellent. This is so much better than the last offense, especially now that like High Dragon HP checks are so low. This is still good, and I think it gets better. Well, obviously it gets better if fights go longer, but if you're able to engineer a way to trigger this frequently, I think it's pretty good. Yeah, with the rolls having iframes thing though, and us being able to avoid damage more than in the past, I do sort of wonder about this. How easy will it be? The thing about him is he's going to be able to get the first charge easily, right, with Macho Charge. But on subsequent uses, if you're down to 20% HP and you reuse it, I don't think that's going to count as triggering your resilient offense. So you would actually need to heal up a little bit and then go back down, to my knowledge at least. So while good and pretty much a guaranteed 10% strength buff on him, I wonder how hard it's going to be to get the 30% that you want on that in full. But still, this is a character I really like if I end up summoning here. Like, so far all three of the characters are ones I would feel very satisfied pulling. Let's continue. And to end us off, we have the dragon on this banner, Tie Shan Gong Zhu. So, are you prepared to be my companion? I think her name means something like Iron Fan Lady or Princess. And she is a dragon famed for her peerless beauty. Her intimidating rage earned her the nickname Rakshasha, which comes from a similar word for a vicious demon. She is married to Mo Wang and clearly runs their relationship. Okay, well, she does have a beautiful portrait for sure, with the dress and with just all of the ornamentation, and her color scheme is really nice. I do like her design. Her skill is Energizing Fan, deals light damage to enemies in a line and energizes the entire team. Once energized, using any applicable skill will reset that adventurer's energy level to 0. She has light HP plus 30%. If the user is attuned to light, increases HP by 30%, and then light skill haste of 35%. So she is just like Azazel, Freya, and Halloween Meridimus. Now we have this in light as well. These dragons tend to really perform best on buff bots or healers. The unfortunate thing with the light element is they have an excellent dragon, Popstar Siren, that's already kind of great on buff bots and healers. So the one character I think that this might be good on is Chitose. He is like a pure buff bot, and having the extra skill haste is perhaps better for him than needing to become Popstar Siren and using the buffs off of Popstar Siren. Like, it honestly might be better if he just maintains his skill 1 and gives more buffs that way. And even then, if let's say you want to transform into her, you're still getting the Energize effect, even if you're not getting the proper Popstar Siren buffs. You're also losing out on the Strength aura though, so that is a consideration. I think this is a type of dragon that if you've already invested into Popstar Siren, I would not go for her. And generally speaking, like, it's a pretty steep cost to play for such a small amount of units that this would be ideal on. And also, Popstar Siren is quite popular because she's able to be used on other element healers and things like Volk's Wrath and Ciela. You see her used a lot, so I think that that would be a better source or sink for your Sunlight Stones in general. Having said that, Tie Shan Gong Zhu, I think is pretty cool, and beautiful dragon, and I wouldn't mind picking up a copy. I mean, I would like the copy just for the Sunlight ore, but probably the weakest thing on the banner here without knowing what Sha Wujing does. Once again, for this, we don't know if these characters are actually going to be on a raid up or they'll just be part of the random luck-based pool that is available on any Gala Dragalia, and perhaps they're even getting added here early ahead of a proper banner where they'll all be on raid up individually. So bear that in mind. Look carefully before you do any summoning if you're going to rush into this tomorrow once it's available. But I think that is pretty much going to do it for today, everyone. I feel like we had a pretty thorough analysis, considering that obviously there are a lot of unknowns on these characters right now, like the modifiers, like the SP costs, and even some unknowns on the Gala itself. I'm still pretty excited about this one, I have to say. I mean, I might continue to hold out, but if Sha Wujing has a raid up, I will probably summon. Otherwise, I may not summon. I like all these characters, but right now, the main reason I'd be summoning is for Eldwater, honestly, because I just need more of that, and I think there are better ways for me to probably get that than summoning on a Gala. So that is going to do it for today, everyone. Let me know what you think about this banner in the comments below. Do you plan to pull? What are your thoughts on it? Are you excited to see everybody here? Like I said before, It's always good to wait, but I understand people are going to go for it day one no matter what. So if you do that, good luck. I wish you the best. That is really going to do it for today, though. So thank you as always for watching, everyone. Take care, and I'll see you next time.